Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. I'm glad you could join me here today for this Motivation and Mindset Monday. Hopefully, you've tuned into previous shows, and you know that each and every week, we want to start our week off by looking to make some headway. Looking to be just a little bit better than we were last week, and last week just a little bit better than we were the week before. That is how we make progress. That is how we grow. That is how we increase our happiness score and really move forward in life. And that's really what it's all about. It's not being perfect. I realized that a number of years ago, but it's simply about trying to be better, right? Not perfect, but we're trying to be better. And that's what today's conversation is really all about. I'm going to share with you a little story that came up just over the past couple days. All of the different stories, all of the Motivation and Mindset Mondays, and all the topics throughout the week are really from the private practice. They're from everyday life, and these are things that we all experience. One of the biggest issues, though, that I see happening right now, and of course, this is a universal issue. It's happened since the beginning of time, I'm sure. I wasn't there, but I'm sure, is communication. It's one of the biggest issues I see right now. There's one part of that is that if someone has a different belief than you, all of a sudden they're put in a different category as they're bad, I don't like them, right? Just because of a belief that they may hold, whether it be a religious belief, a political belief, or whatever it might be. Well, you have to understand is that it's just one belief that the person has. You may share 99 out of 100 similar beliefs, but one belief does not make up that individual, and it really breaks down the communication with another person. The other big thing about communication is this: we hold our current beliefs as if they are set in stone and that they'll never change, and that we're not enabling ourselves to keep that open mind. And I would say even a larger issue is this, is that whatever belief it is that you do hold, too often people simply do not communicate with how they are feeling properly with other individuals. They hold things in. And I mean, how many people do you know where you know something's wrong with them? You know they're upset. You know they're angry. You know they want to say something. You know where they want to talk. But yet they say nothing. Even when you ask them, is something wrong? They say nothing. You ask them, I know that something's going on right now. Could you share that with me? And again, they say nothing. And I understand some people are more introverted. Some people are more internal processors. All of that is understandable. But when you see patterns over time, when people are not saying how they feel, it hurts both sides of the relationship. And we'll get to that just a little bit later in the show of what it does actually to the person holding on to that anger or holding on to the issues, the stress that they're going through. It causes major issues in life and in all parties and all relationships. So there's a couple things. I think people hold these things in is because they want to say them, but they don't want to offend the other person. And they don't know how to say them properly. They haven't really been taught a non-combative way in order to give feedback or present comments or present difficulties without the person getting offended. And I actually I believe it was last Friday, I actually gave a book recommendation on the Friday Review for a book that basically it's the science and art of receiving feedback well. It's just basically giving it and providing it and taking it a little bit better. But the thing is this, today's topic is this, it's about communication. It is actually about being able to share with someone else the way that you feel. And if you're not able to do that, you can't get upset for other people for not knowing how you feel. So if you want something to change with your spouse or your partner or your children or your parents or whatever it might be, you need to let them know how you're feeling, how it's making you feel, even though they may not see it the same way. And oftentimes that's all that it is that the two parties involved, or maybe there's more than that, it could be groups of people, they simply just don't see eye to eye. They have a different background. They have different experiences. But when shared with the other person, from your perspective, done in a respectful way and in a mature way, nobody gets offended. And we'll go over how to do that in just a moment. But the bigger thing is a lot of people simply, they don't want to make waves, right? They don't want to change the status quo. So they're upset with themselves because they want to explain, they want to talk about it, they want to communicate, but they don't want to make waves because they don't know what that will do then to the relationship, whether it be in a work environment, whether it be maybe community-based, church-based, maybe it's your relationship with your spouse or friends. You don't really want things necessarily to change because they're not that bad, but you still want to speak your mind. Well, the thing is this. You're not leaving the openness and opportunity and the thought that actually things could get better then. And maybe your friend or partner or whoever it might be could be thinking the same exact thing. Or maybe they have something they want to share with you. And maybe you just have to be that bigger person, as they say, to go first. But we have to do it in a respectful way. So this is extremely important to me because I just remember growing up, not being the happiest person, the nicest person, all those different types of things. And that was mainly when I got sick. I was very happy, like all of those different things. But the thing is, when you're not doing well, when you're not happy, you kind of just, sometimes you bring other people down with you. I don't know if it's on purpose, but it's certainly a subconscious-based motive for a lot of people because you're in such a bad place, right? Well, we don't necessarily want to do that, right? We want to just more share with people what's going on. And what I want to do with just kind of teach you and share with you right now is what I've learned. And again, everything that I've learned, everything I share with you in the podcast has been through clinical experience, things that I've discovered in my practice, my personal life, and much of it is from learning from many great mentors and reading many thousands of books to try to accumulate the knowledge of all of these brilliant authors and people so that I wouldn't have to live 3,000 plus lifetimes, so it's one of those things as to if I can pass on some tidbits that have really helped me and really helped a lot of people in my life, in my practice, I'd love to be able to do that. So the biggest thing is this. You have to understand something called Hanlon's razor. Again, I love all like Occam's razor you've heard me talk about before, which is basically like the simplest reason is most likely the reason, right? The simplest thing is most likely the answer, right? That's Occam's. But let's look at Hanlon's razor. And I've always explained it like this. This is how I've always said it. Never blame on ill intent or malice, right? Malice is basically ill intent. Never blame on malice what you can attribute to ignorance. So meaning like if someone has offended you, don't jump right away that they did it on purpose, that they were purposely mean to you. Now, I've learned this the hard way over and over and over. Sometimes just in my company or my work or whatever it might be, I'm like, why did that person do that? And I would get upset. And this is going back years because now I've realized because I've just asked them like, hey, like, why did you do that? Why did this happen? And they're like, oh, and here's the reason. I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, I did not even think about that. It did not cross my mind. It wasn't even a possibility. And so if it's not a possibility in your mind, it still could exist. It's just not existing within your frame of reference, your mind, or your dogma right now. Sometimes, Joel, if you keep yourself open to someone who has a drastically different idea about life with you and you are open to a conversation, you can have one of the most amazing conversations in the world. They share perspectives with you that you could not possibly have because you haven't lived that life. You haven't had that experience or it just didn't dawn on you. That's the biggest thing. So Hanlon's razor, again, most things I've kind of experienced in my life, like the 12-week year, I was doing that for years. And then someone wrote a book and I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, this makes it even more concise. Well, I've always just basically said, hey, I never get upset right in the moment because I realize, I try not to, believe me, I'm not perfect by any means. And I certainly do get upset. But, here's the thing. I give people the benefit of the doubt now. I really give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm assuming Hanlon's razor. Hanlon's razor, if you want to quote it, it goes like this. Never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. Now, I don't say that because I don't actually like using that specific phrase. Because a person is not necessarily demonstrating stupidity. It could just be ignorance. And I want to share with you it's a fun example. It's a funny example. It just happened, I don't know, about a week ago or so. So I have a French Bulldog. Many of you have heard me talk about my French Bulldog before, Moose. Moose is an amazing dog. He's my second French Bulldog. We had a French Bulldog many, many years ago when my wife and I first moved to Boston. And that was Turbo. And Turbo has since passed. And our new guy, not so new guy, he's now 9 years old, His name is Moose. And Moose is a ball of energy. He's a great dog, but he doesn't act a whole lot like a French Bulldog, which is more of like a relaxed companion type dog. Moose is a 100% French Bulldog, but he has the energy of a terrier, like a Boston Terrier. He is just full of energy. He's the only French Bulldog I know that needs to run around. Like he actually has to get that energy out. And he's an amazing dog. Not what we expected, though, with a French Bulldog, especially living in an apartment in the city. But I digress. So anyway, in the morning, I'm outside early in the morning with my dog. Nobody's out by then. It's cold in Maine. It's beautiful. It's crisp. I love it. And so I just let him outside. I run around. I'm in the backyard with him. And, he does his business. We'll put it that way, right? He's going to the bathroom. He does his business. And that's that. Well, one morning, one of my daughters had woken up early, so I was just chatting with her, and I let my dog outside. And I just thought he'd stay on the property. But he ended up running, again, I didn't know, but he ended up going across the street and doing his business there that morning. And I had no idea, right? I just assumed that he stayed on our property. Well, again, this is like a week or two ago. I find out later from a neighbor, friends of family, that this neighbor was upset that my dog Moose did his business on his lawn. And they were so upset about it. They're way too upset, by the way, for a dog doing his business on your property. But I get it. They take care of their property and all that. So I understand. I get it. I understand. And so I simply said, how would I have remedied this situation? How would I have fixed this if I didn't know that it actually occurred? So I don't want my neighbor upset. They're all great people. I would have happily picked that up. I would have happily made sure that he's never outside of the yard or the property, any of those things, had I known. But unless someone like my neighbor just comes over and says, hey, you probably didn't know this, but Moose was out the other morning. He came over to my property, did his business, whatever. I'd make sure that didn't happen again. That's one. And number two, I would offer to pick up anything that was on his property. That's a thing. And there's no need to get upset about it. Remember, never attribute to malice what you can attribute to. Never blame on malice. We can attribute to ignorance. That's my saying about it. And the reason is this: I was ignorant to the fact that my dog ever left the yard, right? And that he went on the property and he did his business over there. I had no idea. I was only out in my house for just a couple minutes. That's it. And then I came back out to get him. But, these things happen. And then, again, I have an upset neighbor that I would never have known was upset, again, if it wasn't for someone else sharing that with me. So, of course, I see my neighbor outside and I just say, hey, first things first, right out of the gates, hey, I just wanted to apologize. I had no idea that my guy went over to your property and did his business there. I want to let you know, and this is what I did. I want to let you know is I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen again. I apologize and sorry that you had to pick that up. And that's that. But again, there's no need. All you have to do is keep an openness to the other person that they didn't do anything maliciously. Obviously, this is just a fun little story. There are much bigger stories in life, right? This is just a lighthearted one. But it's also a lighthearted one to show you the example of most likely the person that may have hurt you, they didn't necessarily know they were doing it. And the other thing is that you can't get upset and keep all of that bottled up inside if you can easily and nicely just go over to someone and say, hey, and just for this example, hey, you probably didn't know this, but your dog came over to my yard, this, and this. And then that person has the ability to respond in whatever way they see fit. In my way, I would have been like, I had no idea. I apologize. That shouldn't have happened. That's it. Or then you could say, is this person then really going to be mean or upset about it? Saying, oh, my dog can go wherever he wants. How the person has their option to respond. But your job is to be a good communicator, do it in a respectful way, and then also not have to hold this up inside of you. So I'm doing this talk here today for you as well, meaning that I want to make sure that other people might not be great communicators in your life, but I always want you to be. And here's why. There's another famous quote. I love quotes, as you probably know. There's another famous quote by the Buddha, right? You probably heard of the Buddha before. Well, Buddha said this: holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Well, a pretty harsh quote, but right? Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And the reason why this was said, and all of the wisdom in just one quote was this, is that as anger builds up inside of you, nobody else often knows. again, just back to this silly little example, my neighbor I had no idea that they were that upset. They had held on to this for like a week, right? And then they told someone else. And then that person told me because they knew that I would never have purposely have done that. Again, small little example, but how many bigger examples are out there that people hold on to even more anger for sometimes no reason necessarily at all, especially since you cannot solve a problem without communicating the problem in the first place. So in this, as anger begins to build up inside of you, if you do not share your thoughts with another human being, if you don't communicate, what happens is it starts to weaken your immunity at a health-based level, and it begins to make you more susceptible to illness and aging. Anger literally begins to slow metabolic processes in your body. You produce more stress hormone. You produce more inflammation. And again, it makes you far more susceptible to aging, illness, and just in a bad mood overall, anxiety, etc. So what I want you to do is make sure that you're never drinking your own poison, right? You're never holding on to all that anger, especially when you can present an issue to a person in a way like this. You simply walk up to that person and just give them the benefit of the doubt. Hey, you probably have no idea what happened the other day. Like maybe it was something said at work. Hey, Tim, I just want to let you know, you probably have no idea that this happened, but when you mentioned that the other day, it really made me upset. Here's why. And again, I'm sure that you didn't mean it in this way, but this is how I took it. And you just come into the way, give them the out, meaning like, hey, you probably didn't mean it that way. Hey, you probably weren't thinking of it this way. I know that you wouldn't do this necessarily on purpose, and I know that this probably is just maybe me just kind of over analyzing it, but I wanted to share with you how I felt. If you approach it in a non-combative way, almost no one, there'll always be someone, right? But almost everyone will be okay in that way. And the thing is, it now shows you to be a person that is open and mature and willing to have bigger conversations with people. Because if you could take an issue to someone else and diffuse it in a mature way, in a respectful way, that conversation is going to last in that person's head. One is they offended you and they didn't know it. They didn't mean it. Or if they did even mean it, you can share with them why it was hurtful, why you took offense to it, and not in a way that you're then combative towards them, that you want to do something mean towards them, but simply to let them know, listen, this is how it affected me. I wanted to let you know that. And that person may be able to learn and grow from that situation. And that really is what life's all about. We talked about this in the very beginning of the show. There are many things that I've done wrong in my life. There are many things that I will continue to do wrong in my life. All that I can hope for is that I can learn from them. I can try to do better. I can think different thoughts. I can now have a new perspective on things, and then I'm able to take different actions. And that's literally how we make change in life, right? We learn, we then think differently about it because of our new perspective. We have different feelings about the subject. We then take different actions, and those different actions allow us to get a different result in life. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to have to learn over and over all sorts of different new things in life, but again, that's part of the growth process. And as you learn new things, you can also translate that new knowledge into other areas of your life so that you don't have to have the same learning curve in those. And that's why I'm always telling people too, what you can learn from your health or success in a business or success with family, whatever it might be, you can translate that confidence, that ability to achieve into other areas of your life. It's vitally important that you don't need to relearn every new thing in your life. That you can say, oh, I see, this kind of works like this. And if I was able to change that there, well, I could probably make this tweak here. And if I'm able to do that, well, then I can get this result. And after that result, well, then I can take things to the next level. Because life really is just about levels. It's like, okay, you learn at the baseline. You learn as a baby and a toddler and a child and a teenager, and then you're off to university and college, and then you get your first job, and then you have a family. You have all of these life experiences, and every year you're accumulating more wisdom as long as you're open to learning. And so much of that learning comes with open communication. If you have a question, ask. Again, like people love to be able to teach. So if you ask someone, hey, why did you decide to do that? Or why did you do that in this situation? I'm really interested in learning. You don't want them to go on the offensive right away. You always just want to say, hey, I'm interested in learning. Or why did you mention that the other day? Or you may not have known this, but this is how I took that. Is that how you meant it? So what I want you to do is simply approach situations using Hanlon's razor. Never blame on malice what you can attribute to ignorance. Meaning, like, most people in life aren't purposely trying to offend you or hurt you. That thing, if you can just think that, if you can take that one thing away from this conversation, you're going to be a much happier individual, and you're going to react less combatively. All right, it's not, you're not going to be perfect. Maybe you will be. I'm not perfect. I haven't been able to achieve that yet. I'll keep shooting for it. But the other is this: if something did offend you, and even if you don't want to communicate it yet, you're not ready to yet, what I say is this: you holding on to anger is only hurting you. As the Buddha says, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I want you to make sure that you're also taking care of you. So you want to get to the point where people aren't offending you, even if they are trying. That you are able to see that different people have different perspectives in life. Different people act in different ways. But you are able to be your own person. You're also able to rise above, as they say. You're able to, even if someone's angry, even if someone's combative, you're able to say, I can see where you're coming from. I understand your perspective. I don't necessarily share that, but I get it. And you know what? What I want to make sure that is that in the future, we can always keep this open dialogue. We can agree to disagree, but I appreciate you being able to have this conversation with me. That's it. Again, you don't have to be combative, but I do always want you to be able to speak your mind, do it in a respectful way, a mature way, and everybody wins in that type of situation. Hopefully today's conversation was helpful. I really do appreciate you tuning into these Mindset and Motivation Mondays. Thank you so much. And as always, please do feel free to share this show with anyone you believe it could serve. I want to sincerely thank you for your support of this podcast. I couldn't do it without you, and I mean that. I truly do. I also want to make sure you knew that we now have multiple ways for you to find your answers to the most difficult health, wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging questions. You can find podcast-specific topics like thyroid, adrenal, hormones, sleep, digestion, Ayurveda, and many more at stevencabral.com/podcasts that will then link you to your favorite Apple, Spotify, and other podcast players. Plus, all new podcasts and weekly exclusive video content is being added to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Stephen Cabral. And that's Stephen with a PH. Head on over and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the exclusive content. Lastly, if you've ever found any of my podcasts or books to be helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a review on iTunes or your favorite media player for the podcast. Rating and subscribing to the YouTube and podcast allow me to reach more and more people and help spread my mission of healing throughout the world. Thank you again for being a part of this movement.